I had a
Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that have taken a side, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation building. Globespan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana.
This land is our land now.
As the world turns on its axis, bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
We ain't giving up no river that belong to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain.
Everyone in Guyana, in the Caribbean, in the United States, and around the world. You're listening to Globespan 24/7 live. And we must thank all our sponsors and all our listeners for tuning in tonight because we have a very special, important guest, Mr. Nigel Hughes. But before we get to him, I want to let you all know that we span the globe and we are a fair and balanced network, which means that we invite all persons from different political parties, trade unions, civic organizations, and religious groups to be our guests. We do not discriminate against anyone. I want to say that this program is being made available by Mr. Noir Singh, and our two technical directors are Mr. Devin Bissoon and Mr. Ryan Gopin. And we want to let you know as well that we broadcast live on Facebook and all the other social networks, YouTube and all the rest of the social networks. So tonight, we'll be discussing the political situation in Guyana and the role of third parties by one of Guyana's most prominent lawyers, a distinguished gentleman, Mr. and leader of the Alliance for Change Party, Mr. Nigel Hughes. Mr. Hughes, welcome to the program.
Good evening, Professor Rose. Always a pleasure and a privilege to be on your program. And I thank you for inviting me this evening.
Mr. Hughes, you became the leader of the Alliance for Change a little over a year ago. Can you tell our listeners what are some of the changes you made? What are some of your plans and the vision for the party? And how you will take this party into this election here? I know you have adopted a very popular slogan, better must come. So can you explain to our listeners what you have done so far?
Okay, it's not a year yet. I got there, yeah, just about a year, not quite a year. The better must come slogan was a slogan I had from before 2010, 2011, before that election. And so it's been with me for a while because the idea, the concept, the philosophy behind better must come is that we must always, and we are capable of changing our circumstances positively, improving them. And it's despite the fact that we may be in an environment where we believe that we are trapped either by history or we're trapped by circumstances, we must always endeavor to ensure that we are capable of better, that we have it within ourselves to be better. And just to quote Amanda Gorman from On the Hill, we must believe that we are capable of being better if we can only just believe. And as you know, Guyana has had more resources long before we found oil than any other country in the Caribbean, and we have not managed that collectively as a people to the benefit of as many of us as is possible. So the idea that we should collectively work for better is the foundation or underlying philosophy of that concept of better must come.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, you have been traveling the country since you became the leader of the party, crisscrossing all around the interlands, the coastal belt, and every other place. What are some of the most pressing issues affecting the people of this country that you have heard from them?
The number one issue, whether on the coast or whether from the hinterland, I was just there today, is the cost of living. Everybody is adversely impacted by the cost of living. And it's not just the people. All the polls that we have seen have suggested that the number one issue is the cost of living.
And what about number 2 and 3? Any? Go ahead.
Depending on which community you speak with, number 2 would be corruption. Number 2 also in some communities is the fact that there has been unequal development, unequal allocation of resources, unequal opportunities. Some communities have no opportunities at all, and that as a consequence, there has been unequal development across the entire country. That would be the number 2. But like I said, depends on which area. Corruption is the number 2 in some areas. And in other areas, the question of just projects that never get concluded, or projects that you have to spend the same amount of money twice. A lot of the campaign issues and promises, cheap electricity, etc., that have not come forward. So it depends on which community, but number 1 across all communities, irrespective of ethnicity, race, geography, is cost of living.
Mr. Hughes, you're a brilliant lawyer. And to all our listeners...
but I'm a lawyer. I don't have a brilliant, I'm a lawyer.
And you have been, well, I'm going to use the word because you are. And you have been a very prominent lawyer as well. And assuming the leadership of the AFC, you have given up a very lucrative position as a lawyer to come to a position that you're not getting no paid on what have you. Why did you make that change?
Professor Roses, I left politics in 2016 because I wasn't, for various reasons. Let me not go into that in too much depth. But after we discovered oil, of course, in 2015, I left early in 2016, and we started commercial production of oil effectively at the start of 2020, end of 2019. And the income that we've generated from that has been staggering. Equally staggering has been how we have failed to manage that properly. In 1 year, as you know, I think in 2023, we spent 97% of our income from oil alone on various projects, which have not been accounted for, and which I don't think is a prudent a prudent way in which we should manage those resources. The way in which contracts have been undertaken in mega projects with minimum, if any, feasibility being done. We have seen, the lack of justice and access to justice. We had during this period of time the Henry boys killed. We've had recently Adriana Young, in between that, Boston shot in his bed. A series of really unacceptable excesses by the Guyana police force with no accountability. And I realized that what was going to happen here is that we were creating an oligarchy where a very small number of people were benefiting from the largesse from oil. And this was not only not being managed properly, but even the approach to managing it was very, very selective. So the friends, the family of that very, very close circle, you can't even say all the PPP members. This is a very elite, exclusive circle, were making tremendous amounts of profits from oil and gas. And as a consequence, that is leading to, or has led to, significant dislocation in the society. And of course, what has happened as a result of oil is that the cost of living has gone up. People's salaries have remained stagnant. They are unable to manage it. I think the last report, Demerara Wave, said 75% increase in the cost of living over the last 4 years. And I realized that we were going down a path that would lead to serious social disruption. It would lead to serious dislocation. I think it would have increased the already fragile ethnic relations in the country. Um, Communities, particularly the indigenous communities that have been excluded quite often by the coastlanders across the political divide, were being pushed even further into economically difficult circumstances. And I thought, I've had amongst the best that this country has had to offer. I've had just up to university, attended some of the best schools here, and I was privileged enough to be able to go to university overseas again, pretty top school. And I think that, time had come where I wanted to serve in a public capacity, but more importantly, I wanted to do as much as I can to arrest what is clearly heading to the abyss in Guyana. I think we are heading to very dangerous waters, and unfortunately, we don't want to go back to where we were in the 60s under any circumstances at all, but the tensions and all the other indicators are quite strong in that regard. And that was what motivated me.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. I want our listeners to know that we are getting a number of questions to be asked, but I can only ask so many questions. So bear with me. All the questions you're sending me cannot be asked tonight. So I already got 16 questions. So one of our listeners want to know that your company have been associated with ExxonMobil. I know you've explained it before time and time again. And the important thing to seem to think that this is a conflict of interest. So tell our listeners once and for all what relationship your company has with ExxonMobil.
Sure. I don't think this would be for all, but it's another opportunity for me to explain. Okay, back in 2000 and, well, it must be six or thereabouts, my partner and I, this is Andrew Pollard in the law firm, decided that we would concentrate a lot of our focus in terms of legal practice in the oil sector. At that time, we had not found oil. At that time, there was no suggestion that we were going to find oil. But what had happened is traditionally, from the time the firm was set up in 1972 by my father and the other two partners, whenever there was an exploratory round, the international companies invariably retained the firm. So when Continental was drilling back in the late 70s, I think it was the early 80s, Tidewater had come in, they were doing some drilling. All those Shell, when they were in the joint venture with Exxon and CNOOC, all those companies traditionally came to our firm and we represented them. So Exxon would have been, I think they started to represent the company sometime, sorry, the company started to represent them sometime in 2008, 2010. Now, I would represent some of those companies and Mr. Pollard would represent some of those companies. Mr. Exxon is Mr. Pollard's client, and the way the firm operates is Mr. Pollard exclusively provides services to them. I would not touch them, but the firm is retained. When Exxon discovered oil in 2015 May, of course, it was huge international news. It was the largest find in the last 15 years. And Mr. Pollard continued to advise the company. I advised other oil companies, some of the majors, some of those that are what we call tier one companies. When as you know, I was not I was on the list, but I did not take any government position in 2015 when the coalition won. The only interest I had was, and remains, not only, but primary interest now, but only interest then was constitutional reform. Those submissions went in. In 2020, again, I continued to represent the various oil companies. Mr. Pollard was the sole lawyer that dealt with Exxon, sole lawyer that dealt with CNOOC, and represented them. When I decided in 2024, July, to re-enter politics, I contested for the leadership of the Alliance for Change. I actually disclosed this. I was the person that disclosed that the law firm worked for Exxon. I did that on a David Hines program. He was interviewing me about the new position I got, and I disclosed it because I think it is something that people need to know. I also disclosed that because the law firm acts for Exxon, what we had done, I never worked for them. and I would not be involved in any oil decision, not because I worked specifically on the portfolio of Exxon, but because there clearly would have been some suggestion that because the law firm represented Exxon, it would advance the interests of Exxon. So I spoke to the party and I asked to be excluded, completely excluded from any policy, any discussions, anything to do with oil. And I asked the party to identify two people who had sufficient experience in oil to deal with oil and gas so that I would have nothing to do with it. I wouldn't be anywhere close to any of their committees, their deliberations. And those two persons were Dr. Vincent Adams and David Patterson. They came together and they were, I think, holding meetings in the party. They were consulting with persons outside of the party in relation to oil and gas. And I would repeatedly get asked about this. And on every occasion, I took the opportunity to say I had nothing to do with it because I didn't want, one, somehow to be suggesting that the party was being used as an instrument to advance Exxon's interests. And secondly, my partner in the law firm, I didn't want it suggested that somehow or the other my political endeavors would impact upon him. So that has continued, and all the press conferences, all the public engagements, questions on oil and gas have gone to Dr. Adams and David Patterson. I do want to take the opportunity to say that they came up with an oil and gas policy for the party for the elections, which no other party has done. The Alliance for Change has done it. And in that, when it was released, which is the time I saw it, it includes all the things people have been talking about, entering into discussions with Exxon about renegotiating the contract, ring fencing, and various, I think it was an 18 or 20 point program on it. And we went forward. I mean, they went forward with it. I hardly think people can suggest that the AFC's proposals on oil and gas would have been anyway framed by Exxon. They're quite, I think on some occasions, they're quite robust in the way in which they treat with Exxon. And I have had nothing to deal with it. So I made that very clear. People have also asked, in the event that I was elected to be president of the country, what the position would be. I'm not sure why that'd be a difficulty, because clearly, if I was privileged enough to be elected, I clearly can no longer practice law. I clearly would not continue to be a member of the Chamber of Hughes, Fees, and Stobie. And obviously, Hughes, Fees, and Stobie is not going to be the beneficiary of government work. That's not the way the Alliance for Change operates. So I think I've endeavored, let me say, to address all the questions. And I welcome more questions from your listeners on this, because I think it's important that people understand. And you're in the United States. It's not unusual for people who are in their professions to get elected to office. I think Mr. Dick Cheney was Halliburton before he became vice president. And there have been various instances actually closer to home in Barbados. David Thompson in Barbados, who was leader of the opposition and prime minister, I believe, at one stage, was a leading lawyer for one of the companies in Barbados, and of course had to address this. The way to approach this is to have very clear rules for conflict of interest situations and transparency. And I think the Alliance for Change was the first party when this issue arose that said, look, let's have a set of rules that deal with conflict of interest so everybody is clear on what those rules should be and what has to happen. Mr. Nandala, was head of one of the chambers before he came in Attorney General. And you're going to continue to have in Guyana people who either the head or in senior positions in various entities who are perhaps going to offer service to the country. And we just need to make sure that we have clear rules and clear guidelines when that's so. And I welcome robust rules on conflict of interest and other matters.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. So folks, you all heard it here. He has nothing to do with ExxonMobil. It's his partner. So
and I had nothing to do. I just want to make sure that I never personally, I mean, I think there was one criminal case. I no longer represent them in that with the tax department, but I'm not the lawyer. I've never advised Exxon.
So, folks, you heard it here for the first time, and you're listening to Globespan 24/7 live. Mr. Hughes, let's say that you were elected to the government tomorrow and you became the president of Guyana. How would you have dealt with one, corruption, two, reduce the cost of living?
Okay, corruption. Corruption is a real bane in Ghana. It's actually become it's it's almost there's a saying in Ghana, money go for Mac, as they say, and people believe now that that is an excuse for people to engage in unorthodox or less than legal means or lawful means for getting ahead. So what has happened in Ghana is that because people have been either directly impoverished or the system has been so skewed that they don't have a fair chance if they're bidding, they don't have a fair chance to participate in any process in which the government is allocating contracts. It's now standard practice that you have to grease the palms of someone. And I want people to understand that unlike the United States, the major person who gives out contracts of any magnitude in Guyana is the government. There's no company in the private sector that is going to invite tenders in the region of $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion Guyana dollars, even $900 million Guyana dollars, other than the government. The private sector is minuscule compared to what the government invites bids on and the contracts the government gives out. So obviously, people in the private sector or those who want to get contracts don't have a private sector to go to. They're going to go to the government. And it's been like that for a long time. See the French contracts before we found oil. They used to be the ones that were 400-500 million US dollars. So the government is the largest person who offers contracts. So corruption is almost, I don't want to say inevitable, but it is going to happen because people want to get those jobs. They want to get the contracts. And the way in which you are going to try to fight that has to be robust because the contracts are so large. If you had a contract for 4 billion Guyana dollars, there's enough space in there where you can pay everybody from the top all the way down to those who have to, sign licenses. And so the temptation has always been great. We have never had a robust, for example, Integrity Commission. The Integrity Commission doesn't have the staff. The only way you can fight corruption is if you're prepared to fund the agencies that investigate. You have to be prepared to empower them to prosecute, and the fines have to be significant. Now, the Integrity Commission really is just a collector of information. They send out some standard forms to you. They ask you what your assets are. They don't even have the ability to investigate at a serious level your declarations. So if people are holding contracts, let's say, who have accounts in Hong Kong or in Macau or in Beijing or wherever they tend to keep that money, the Integrity Commission has no capacity, none. It is not as if they have on their staff 10 forensic accountants who are tasked with the responsibility of investigating all of these declarations, both in Guyana and externally. We have no treaties with a lot of the places where people hide money. We have no legal mechanisms for being able to track the flow of money from various places. And so we have to start off by making sure that we have an Integrity Commission that is well-funded, well-resourced, and has seriously qualified forensic analysts. In addition to that, the really large corruption, we don't have the technical capacity in Guyana. If you just look at doing the audit for Exxon's declarations, Exxon sends a ton of information. Just to go through that audit, I don't think many of the accounting firms, if any, have on staff enough persons to do that. So when it comes to corruption, you need to have relationships with the big forensic accountants in the world and the forensic investigators, and you hire them. You hire them on contract and say, look, this is a suspicious transaction. This is the legislative framework. These are the treaties that we have. These are the protocols that we have. Go find this money. And you can even, incentivize them in terms of what they recover. And you need to work in collaboration with international agencies. Money laundering. The money laundering, the body responsible for investigating money laundering, again, totally under-resourced, doesn't have the human or the financial resources because there's no will to go after money launderers. And so, insofar as any serious fight against corruption is concerned, it has to start with the allocation of resources to those agencies which are responsible for investigating proceeds of illegal crime, money laundering, corruption, and what have you. And we also have to have a Freedom of Information Act. We have to have a right to freedom of information. Citizens must have a right to freedom of information of the government and what the government is doing with their money. So it's not a question of you go to the Commission of Information and when he decides or whether he thinks it's important, it's only national security that should be excluded. People must have a right to access to that information. So for example, Hossororo School, contract awarded at, I can't remember, 1.2 billion. All of a sudden, the contract is signed at 1.4 billion or 2.4 or whatever the numbers are. People have to have a right. Why is there suddenly $200 million extra on that contract with no explanation? I look again at the road across the river, the highway across the river. One of the lots in that highway was $600 million over the engineer's estimate. Citizens should have a right to understand, to ask the minister or ask the agency, why is this block $600 million over the engineer's estimate? Is it going around? Are you building a tunnel through a mountain or something? So those are the starting blocks for fighting corruption. We got to have extradition treaties with places where people tend to hide their money. We have to have the ability to intercept information where people are suspected of moving the proceeds of crime. So that's that. In relation to cost of living, there are many things that can happen and many ways of addressing cost of living. As you know, there was a recent report that Guyana perhaps is one of the few countries in the world that is self-sufficient in terms of food. Now, there's a big difference between availability of food in terms of the production of agricultural produce and access to it. So we might plant enough rice or plant enough ground provisions. The problem is between the actual cultivation and the delivery of the product in the market to the consumer, there's a huge cost factor. And that's a problem. You might be planting boro, you're planting baji, or whatever you're planting, but the cost of production there and the delivery in the market to the consumer is significant. One of the proposals the Alliance for Change has is that we have to reduce the cost of transportation, the cost of movement of those products from the place of production to the marketplace. So some form of subsidy will have to be introduced just to make sure on those items the price is brought down. We have a marketplace now where the large offshore oil companies are coming into the marketplace and buying supplies for the persons working offshore. That pushes up the price. Again, the subsidies for the transportation of those prices should be done. Secondly, we have extremely vulnerable sectors of the community. Single-parent mothers who are probably on a salary or struggling to make their business. They haven't seen an upward movement in their income or their salaries. So for some basic items, food, we would provide them with the means in which they can get a subsidy. They would be assessed to see whether or not they're deserving, and then they would be issued some form of certificate which will allow them to acquire goods at subsidized prices. Food security. The government has to start storing some of the produce that we make so that when there's a spike, the government has the reserves that will allow those products to be released on the market so that the consumer doesn't get completely exploited as a result of spike. Because every time there's an increase in salaries to the public service, all of a sudden the prices go up in the market without any increased costs. So we have to manage that, and it has to be done in a prudent way. It can't be done ad hoc. You have to have a long-term plan about how you are going to manage the production of food and the availability of food in the market. Again, the foreign currency crisis that we have, because a lot of foreign currency, apart from what's going on in construction, is going for the importation of goods that are, I don't want to say they're luxury goods, but they're goods that are not priority. And therefore, we have to identify um, fiscal programs to address this, but it can be ad hoc. We have to have like 10-year, 5-year plans. And we have to have one of our proposals is that we have a ministry of a national estate planning commission, which every day is receiving data on what's going on in the market. Now, that does many things. It allows you to predict what is likely to happen
Right,
down the
right.
road. So, for example, with rice, I think the last crop, India went back in a large way into rice production, and so did China. So we knew that the rice price was likely to drop, and we have to know what the impact of reduced global prices for rice is likely to have here in Guyana. So you don't wait until the farmers start planting, they're buying fertilizer at a particular rate, and then they're only getting $4,000 per bag of paddy. All these predictable, avoidable issues has to be done. And you have the capacity now, apart from AI, if you have the agencies that are looking at this data, just as how you would look at your stocks and decide where you're likely to want to invest in the next year, whether you want to do long-term bonds, when you want to go on the stock market, and what aspect of the stock market you want to go into. It is that level of advanced processing of information and access to information that we believe is going to be important for reducing the cost of living. Um, Transportation, big item in terms of cost of living. That has to be addressed in a holistic manner. Also, the way in which the Bank of Guyana, the central bank, releases money into the banking system has an effect on the exchange rate. And the exchange rate clearly has an impact on the cost of living and the cost of goods. All of that has to be managed by a central bank governor who is completely independent of the government. He can't be under the direction of the Minister of Finance. You have to make sure you have the best experts sitting on that board and that the governor is truly independent. So there are a lot of measures like that that can be undertaken. I think initially, to cushion some of the cost of living issues, we will have to look at real subsidies, sustainable subsidies in some cases. But like I said, the initial one would be to reduce the cost of moving goods from the place of production to the marketplace. I think that will have a significant effect. Also, we have to make sure that we increase our food production and we create enough incentives for people to go into that area.
Thank you, Mr. Yu. That's well said and well put to everyone. Today is a holiday in Guyana. It's CARICOM's Day. So I wish all Guyanese a happy CARICOM Day, and also in the Caribbean. I hope everyone had an enjoyable time today. Now, Mr. Hughes, uh, if your party is elected to government, do you have enough members to fill all the cabinet posts, or
Yeah,
you will bring members from outside of that? The question I want to put to you, do you believe in an inclusive government? And if
absolutely.
so, would you establish one?
Sure. I said this up to last week, and I will say it again. And I'm gonna just pick perhaps the easiest non-controversial, and then I'll come to those that perhaps are not as immune to problems as otherwise.
Right.
The border. We have a real problem with the border. Fortunately, all the political parties have been on the same page in terms of respecting the importance of the border, our western border in relation to Venezuela. We've committed to a process, and I think all the political parties are committed to supporting the outcome of that process. We know that we have had some exceptionally talented Guyanese who have given a lot of their life's work to protecting the Guyana border at every international forum. And I picked the most obvious at the moment, who's still with us. We have Carl Greenwich. Before that, we had people like Rashid Jackson. We had Mr. Insinali. We still have several very highly qualified persons in that area. An AFC government will go to those persons and make sure that they head those agencies that have been responsible for and have done good work up to date, irrespective of which party is in power. Because the development of Guyana is about Guyanese, not about AFC Guyanese or PPP Guyanese. The development of Guyana is about Guyanese and where you can find the best talent. Now, you know that in several industries, the best talent in Guyana is in the diaspora. And a lot of the talent that is best suited to develop the country is not involved in politics. They don't want to get into the nastiness of politics. But that is absolutely no reason why we can't hire the best available in the diaspora to come and deal with specific areas. Oil and gas, for example. So to answer your question, an AFC-led government will perhaps have more non-party persons in senior decision-making positions. And that's not because we don't have the people, but that is because we believe that it is important that we have a cross-political alignment in which we hire and we seek out the best that is available. You may recall, as soon as I was elected, the party said we need 10 to 15-year programs and policies and plans in 5 key areas and upon which we must seek political consensus. So in other words, all the political parties should get together in these 5 areas. And those 5 areas were: 1, education. Let us agree a 10 to 15-year plan. We have clear objectives. Even if we change political parties, even if the political cycle changes, the PPP comes out now, the AFC goes in next, somebody else comes in 2030. If we have a broad overarching 15-year plan with broad parameters, you can probably tweak it here and there depending on who's elected. And we have the objective that we want to have the best educated children at all levels. And this is the process that we use to get there. Let's agree that. Let's sign off on a protocol. We said this for the development of the economy. We said this for foreign affairs. We say this for health. And we also say that for the reduction of poverty and the leveling up. That's across the board. As soon as we get in, that's what we will say. Let us have this policy. Because Guyana, no one party is the repository of all the talent. And it's time we break this cycle where when you go in, you think all of a sudden you alone must make the decisions and that you don't consult. And so one of the things we've mentioned is that every month to every 6 weeks, there must be a formal engagement between the government, the opposition parties, and leading civil society organizations just to talk about development, the program, and to deal with the way in which the country moves forward. The country can't move forward with one side assuming that their developmental process is the only one that's available. So the FC's position in that is and has always been that we will hire the best talent that is available, whether or not, irrespective of its political affiliation.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Now, again, let me caution our listeners, I cannot ask Mr. Hughes all your questions. I'm up to 27 questions. But there's a second question from our listeners to you. You were in negotiations with, your party were in negotiations with APNU to form a coalition government. And partly talks broke down, and you all tried a second time, and talks broke down again. Can you tell our listeners what were some of the sticking points that led to the breakdown of those talks?
I will just give you the chronology of what happened, and it's important for me that listeners come to their own conclusions.
Okay.
So there was an alliance between the APNU and the AFC signed called the Cummingsburg Accord back in 2014, early 2015, sorry, not 2014, 2015. They went into office. There were various challenges while they were in office. They were removed from office in 2020. the party that was perhaps the most damaged as a result of that engagement and that relationship was the Alliance for Change. To start with, the MP that brought the government down came from the Alliance for Change. And for a lot of people, they felt that, first of all, the Alliance for Change should not have entered into an arrangement because they had said that they will keep the line between the major political parties, which essentially represent the major ethnic groups. In 2020, my predecessor, Mr. Ramjatan, under his leadership, they extended the accord until 2022, I think it was, for 3 years. In 2019, they did that. And at the end of that period, the Alliance for Change voted not to extend the coalition, the accord. During that period of time, while Mr. Ramjatan was the leader of the Alliance for Change, he was in discussions with Mr. Norton. I didn't know this until maybe a week or so ago. And they had identified 3 people, including Mr. Etta Fernandes, Mr. Sher Duncan, and Mr. Ram Sarup, who were going to be key people from the Alliance for Change who were going to participate in various positions, including prime ministerial positions, in any alliance between the APNU and the AFC, and those discussions took place. Mr. Ramjatan was the leader. Apparently, a lot of the party were unaware of those discussions taking place. And then we came to elections last year in July 2024, and a different slate was elected. I happened to be elected the leader, and there were other persons elected. There was no disclosure of these existing discussions that were going on between Mr. Norton and Mr. Ramjatan. And I articulated a different vision for the Alliance for Change in my acceptance presentation to the party. And one of the things that I articulated was the Alliance for Change has to rebuild itself. And in order to rebuild itself, it has to look at where it went into error and identify those errors and begin to address it. So the party had to rebuild itself. Now, during this period, these persons who clearly did not prevail at the elections, who were promised various positions in the discussions between my predecessor and Mr. Norton, I invited them on the day of my election. Even though the result was not one that was favorable to them, I invited them onto the highest decision-making bodies. I co-opted them under the powers I had as leader of the Alliance for Change. I co-opted them because they clearly were very popular. They had talent, and they were members of parliament. They attended very few meetings. We had maybe 1 or 2 press conferences in which they participated. Fast forward to November last year, when the whole issue of coalition came up and what a coalition would look like, the parties started discussions, and we entered into an MOU with the APNU in which we said, look, we will explore whether or not we can enter into another accord and what the terms of the accord were. I identified 3 negotiators on behalf of the Alliance for Change. Those negotiators were Raphael Trotman, Kemraj Ramjatan, 2 founder leaders of the Alliance for Change when I was not there, as well as Alston Stewart from Jamaica, who had been very integral to the parties entering into the first accord back in 2015. The assumption was that if you have the founder leaders who've been there from the beginning, they have the full history of the party. I had been absent for almost a decade, and that they would be the persons best capable and qualified to represent the party's interest. I said to them, let's get policies and programs which an alliance, a coalition government would have, and what are the priorities and how we would carry that out. The PNC similarly identified 3 negotiators. I'm not sure I remember all 3. It was David Hales, the other 2 escaped me at the moment. And they started to discuss. I said to our negotiators, I don't need a weekly, daily report on what's going on. You know what our objective is. They came back after must have been a week or thereabouts, maybe less, and said that the PNC had 1 item on their agenda, and we had the policies and programs. And the PNC's agenda, single item agenda was that their candidate should be the presidential candidate. They had no other major concern that their candidate should be the presidential candidate because their executive had passed a resolution to this effect. Our position in relation to the presidential candidate was, look, what we want is we need to identify by some sort of scientific process who would be best suited to lead a coalition to victory. And therefore, all we said is, look, let's identify a scientific methodology, whether it's polls or whatever, polls plus, polls minus, or whatever scientific methodology you use to identify who would be the best person to lead. They said, no, they don't, that's not their approach. They have a mandate. So it never got past that point initially. There was a sunset date, 31st of August 2020, sorry, 31st of March 2025. About maybe 4 or 5 days before that, I made a public statement saying, look, I and the Alliance for Change has agreed to remove their leader for consideration as presidential candidate. And we believe that we should identify a consensus candidate who would be best equipped to unify the opposition parties and take coalition to victory. We said, look, let's find a consensus candidate. One of the journalists asked me whom, and at the time I suggested that Dr. Campbell, but he's by no means was the only person. The response to that we got was that they don't believe in the principle of consensus candidate. They specifically said, what is a consensus candidate? Does he have a political base? And various questions. So the 31st passed. I think we had a meeting, a last-ditch meeting at a location in Quamana Street. And people continued. There was a groundswell of saying, look, you guys have to sort this problem out. We actually proposed to the APNU that, yes, you can take the presidential candidate, but the leader of the list has to come from the Alliance for Change, as well as the PM, because if you're president, where you have all the executive power, and you are also the leader of the list, you actually determine who goes into parliament, therefore you determine who can become a minister. And even if we have an accord, we can't take you to court because there's no restriction on the power of the leader of the list to identify who goes into parliament, and therefore we needed some security. That proposal was also rejected. There was then a personal meeting between myself and Mr. Norton, and we said, look, let's find a consensus candidate. We understand that you have concerns that the consensus candidate may not have come from the People's National Congress, and we immediately suggested Carl Greenidge, who is eminently qualified, served the country as finance minister, has served the country on the border issues, and has an unblemished record and would unite the parties. That proposal was rejected. We inquired about whether Amanda Walton would be a person, she was popular, and whether she would be somebody that was also rejected. We said, look, what about somebody like Terence Campbell? Not in any political party outside of the parties. That was also rejected. So having rejected even the offer where we said you could be the presidential candidate, and also the suggestions that we made in relation to potential consensus candidates, it was clear that reaching anything looking like a coalition was particularly difficult. And so, of course, we are where we are today. The Alliance for Change maintains its core principles, and certainly under my leadership, that's what I intend to do, because we have to break this logjam that exists here. And that has to come through policies and programs. I know a lot of people say we want to remove the PPP. Of course, you have to remove the PPP, but it is what happens after you remove the PPP. And that to me is equally important as removing the People's Progressive Party, because you don't want to have a system in which all you're doing is changing the colors. You want a system in which there's fundamental change. So for example, what has kept this country separated since independence and before independence is the issue of race. And so you cannot give all the executive power to one party simply because they get 50.5% of the vote. Excuse me. And we have consistently said the constitutional architecture of the country has to change. So we have a broad-based set of programs, including constitutional change, but also in terms of development. We have released a 10-region infrastructure development plan. We have plans for education. We have plans for business, particularly because we don't want to end up where you everybody thinks they're entitled and nobody's concentrating on production, because at the end of the day, you got to manage the economy, you have to grow the economy, you have to particularly grow the non-oil sector of the economy, because oil is volatile and oil is also wasting assets. So after 15 years, it's going to be gone. And by that time, we must have a non-oil economy that is probably twice the size of the oil economy. So the loss of that resource is not going to be as heavily impactful as we anticipate. But that is where we are, and then that is the history of what happened with the endeavors to arrive at a coalition agreement.
In 2011, the AFC held the balance of power with 7 seats in parliament, and it aligned with the coalition APNU. If the AFC should hold the balance of power in 2025, which party would you align with?
There's okay, two things. I want to just correct that first. In 2011, when we held the balance of power, we didn't align with. What we did is that on issues we voted with the main opposition party. So on budget, for example, we voted with the main opposition party at the time because, if you can remember, the level of corruption and the level of abuse in 2020, but in 2011 and before that, the PPP had been in office since 1992. So by 2020, by 2011, they had been in there, close to 20 years. And of course, you know what happens if you've got unrestricted power, particularly under this constitution for 20 years. So I wouldn't say that it was an alliance between the AFC and the PNC. What there was the commonality of interest insofar as matters and legislation came to the National Assembly. To answer your question about if we hold the balance of power in the 2025 election, the Alliance for Change will continue to be an independent party that will assess policies that are long-term and short-term based on their merit. And we are making public what our positions are on that before. So it's not going to be an ad hoc approach based on political convenience when you get there. We believe very strongly that we have to have a change in constitutional matters. We believe very strongly that we have to have a development plan for this country for non-oil sectors, and there has to be transparency. So there's no intention to align with. It is whether what is being proposed aligns with our fundamental principles and our programs.
Having said that, when you intend to kick off your campaign, official date?
Our campaign will kick off next week, Monday.
When?
Next week, Monday, nomination day.
On nomination day. And can you tell our listeners what are some of the policies on your major platform that you intend to campaign on?
You have the time?
Pardon me?
Do you have the time? I mean, there's so many policies in so many areas.
Well, give us at least about 10 major ones.
Okay, I can do I can do infrastructure, I can do education, which in and of themselves would take up a lot of time. But let me do the infrastructure plan to start with, and I'll do let me reverse that. Okay. For us, education is the major sector for the short, medium, and long-term development of this country. If we don't make our citizens skilled and semi-skilled, their opportunity to participate in a modern economy is going to be close to zero. And it's obvious. The oil industry is going to dominate this country for the next 15 to 20 years unless something particularly catastrophic or particularly new takes place, which means that industry is going to drive the economy. We are going to get up to 1.5 billion barrels a day, 1.5 million barrels, a day by 2030. So just think of the demand, the increased demand for all the resources that support the oil industry, everything from scaffolding to marine services, food, of course, and all the engineering, particularly the engineering services. So for our people, our citizens, to be able to benefit from that, they have to be qualified because the oil industry requires, at a minimum, skilled and semi-skilled persons. Right now, on the most recent available statistics, we are losing, I don't know, 47, 48% of our students who enter secondary school are not finishing. That's a high percentage of persons who are not getting any qualification whatsoever. Therefore, they don't have their ability to participate and get employed in the major industry for the next 15 years is significantly reduced almost to zero. They have no qualification, no skill. And since they haven't finished school and there's no process for them in a formal sense to get trained again, I know we've got TechVoc. We are saying, look, we need to establish in every region centers in which people are going to get trained for 10, 11, 12 months. They get certified at the end of this process once they pass the exams. And we do two things for them. We either get them placed for employment in the oil industry, or if they decide to set up their own businesses, we will give them their tools and the financial advisory services that will allow them to grow their business. So that's what's going to happen. But most importantly, while they're being trained, we will pay them. We will provide them with a stipend because they have families to support. So the state is going to actually help you level up by paying you while you go, you get trained, there will be incentives. Now, you can tell just from the way traffic operates in Guyana that one of the biggest problems we have in this country is just a lack of discipline. Huge lack of discipline. And it of course it affects our approach to everything. If you're not disciplined, you approach the business, the way you think, and we have a national problem with that. So a big component of this training that we will provide will include some significant emphasis on discipline, because that's what you really need to transform your life, your businesses into something that's success. So we're going to have these specialist schools. So that's for the people who drop out. No, let me go to the top of the table and then I'll come back in the middle. Our students who are particularly exceptional on a world level have to be afforded the opportunity to pursue their clear academic careers, chosen professions at the best institutions on the planet. So if you are a civil engineer dealing with structures and you want to go to the best engineering school, whether it's Imperial College in the UK or wherever the best engineering school is, the state will pay for you. We're not going to necessarily oblige you to come back home because we're going to be able to send enough of those persons, and we have to make sure that the environment in Guyana is such that young people want to come back and live in Guyana. They don't right now because they don't see a future here. Even with all this wealth, a lot of young people want to leave, and they want to leave for many reasons, whether it's the corruption, whether the political intervention in the most basic of matters. They don't want they want to leave, but we're going to train them. And while we're doing that, we are going to make sure that we build an equitable, or as equitable as we can, environment in this country where young people want to come back. We can't be losing people at the rate of 70% out of the university or wherever else, or just because they get an opportunity, they want to migrate. So all the matters that adversely impact young people coming back, we will address so that Guyana becomes safe. You don't have to know the ministry, you don't have to know the PS, you don't have to know to get a house lot. So that's at the top. The guys who are best qualified will go to the best education institution, universities globally.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle, the University of Guyana is so critical. It has to be funded on several areas. And the most important part of that is research. If the faculties are not doing research and not getting the funding to do research, and of course the funding to publish, etc., then there's not the rate of development in that faculty does not improve. So salaries for the lecturers, particularly research in fields that are related to the development of Guyana. Those fields are obviously oil and gas, engineering would be the obvious ones, but fields that are related to the development of this country, we will pour money into that research. In addition to that, we will make sure that the salaries are at a level which makes it attractive to international lecturers to come and want to live in Guyana to teach, so that we get what is close to the top of the market, if not top of the market, persons to come and lecture at our faculty on a long-term basis. So if you are a professor at Harvard and you think that you can do a 5-year sabbatical, 2-year sabbatical in Guyana and come and lecture in a particular field, the salary at University of Guyana and the research obligations that we will demand from them would become attractive for them to want to come and share their knowledge during this period. We have the resources. You're not trying to do this for a student population of 1 million people over 5 universities. We have less than 1 million people in the country. So this is achievable stuff. And of course, all of this will be measured. So that's one of the areas that we will say, so that when you leave school, you know that when you go into university again, you're getting a world-class education, not just from local lectures, but local and international lectures. We will also, for those that want to pursue a different career, provide the support for them outside of those technical areas that I talk about. So we will rapidly increase the quality of the services, the teaching and tuition that is done at places like GTI. And again, similar approach, better salaries, better conditions of work, and specialization in the areas in which a new economy for Guyana requires their support. So we're not going to train people to become nuclear scientists because we're not likely to be there or need them, but in related fields. So that's education. And the other thing about education that's important, rather than spend resources on having students take 22, 24 subjects, we will reduce that to depth so that we'll make sure that there's better, a narrow, more relevant focus in the subjects that are required for Guyana. The most important thing in education for us is training the teachers. We have to have a radical overhaul, of the way in which we teach our students. The emphasis has to be on critical thinking from the time they enter play school. So we have a radically different approach that promotes critical thinking, but even more importantly, to be able to have those students develop that capacity, the trainers, the teachers, have to be trained at world-class levels so that they can impart that knowledge to the persons. So the several Potter colleges of education will have to be expanded to different regions, but more importantly, the curriculum, the lecturers, the teachers, apart from salaries, that's almost a no-brainer. The quality of the training for them would have to improve significantly. Again, we will go into the international market as well as the diaspora to find the level of qualification we want to take that project forward. We have a very, very acute problem in indigenous communities. They are so far behind in terms of just their academic performance. And some of that is attributed to the fact that you can't find enough trained teachers in those communities, whether people don't want to go and teach in those communities, or whether even the teachers from those communities who have to come out, for example, to Cyril Potter, if we set up those training facilities with the same standards in all the regions, we will see that increase in the quality of tuition. So we don't end up with a 5% matriculation rate for people after they've spent 5 years in school. So education is the number one, because that's going to become transformational. Even if we are giving people direct transfers of cash, we don't want a nation to become addicted on depending on handouts. What we want is that everybody must have the skill that will allow them to either start their own business or get high quality jobs. Infrastructure, if I can run through this very, very quickly, because I know I've been talking for a while. We have 10 regions in the country. Region 1, at Wona, we will re-establish the palm oil, the production of palm oil. Palm oil has had consistently high prices in the world market since 2019, 2020. And we had that, we had an excellent program in which we were producing palm oil. Now, it will have to be exported directly from that region. So the ports for us that exist there, whether they are at Moruca, the other ports, we will make sure they're upgraded to a stage where they can directly export. So palm oil in region 1. The ports, actually, I was just to mention as a side, I was in Mabaruma yesterday. Mabaruma used to export, well, not export, used to sell vegetables and fruits to Georgetown 20, 30 years ago. They're now importing them from Georgetown. And that means that clearly the agricultural program there has completely failed, and it has to be revitalized so that they increase their agricultural production. Region 2, we will put an international port at Charity. As you know, right now, a lot of coconut and coconut water is exported from that part of the country. And once we make sure that we have the drainage and the agricultural production, they will be able to ship straight from Charity, which is on the Pomeroon River, which is the deepest river in Guyana, to the Caribbean market. And a lot of other food production will come out of that region. And it's what, a day sailing to Trinidad or less, the rest of the Caribbean, probably around similar time. So also in region 2, we will, at Supanam, make sure that we put down a port there and there are increased wharf facilities. Rice, which is an essential part of Region 2's economic viability. The quality of soils in Guyana, we have to improve them so we improve our yields. We'd have to make sure that a lot of research goes into improving the yields for those crops, and that a lot of the tasks that are likely, which are dedicated to predicting what the international price may be for that commodity, is done way in advance. So we don't leave the paddy farmers at the whim and fancy of the world price without at least having some level of research done. Region 3, Parika. Parika will become an international port. We will make sure that the road between Parika and Goshen is paved. And at Goshen to Bartica, we will have a roll-on, roll-off ferry. So you'll be able to drive from Georgetown all the way to Bartica. And also the roads going up the Cuyuni and the Mazaruni, we will make sure that you can actually get out. One of the big things about us is to make sure our plans is that you would be able to get to most part of these countries, of the country, by road network. So we'll have a roll-on, roll-off ferry at Goshen. And similarly at the Breeden Hoop, Stellan, we will have an upgraded port. Region 4, which is the crown jewel, many things. We don't believe in putting more cars on the road to solve our transportation problems. So Durban Park will be made a global, a countrywide, a hub for Region 4. So if you're coming from the East Coast, coming from the East Bank, you will come to Durban Park. And we will also put in light rail between Diamond and Georgetown and between Mahaica and Georgetown. So high quality light rail so that we can move people who are employed and move people generally to the city without having to add 10,000 cars every quarter or whatever number that is. That will be a central part. And one of the ministries that we will create outside of the Ministry of Public Works is a Ministry of Transportation, because transportation is not it's such a complex subject that you just don't wake up and decide you're putting in an access road. It has to become part of your 10, 15-year plan about how you're moving goods from where they are to the port, how you're moving people up and down. So light rail, larger buses for transit, and Region 4. Now, out at Clonbrook, all the studies that have been done have suggested that Clonbrook is the best location to put a deep water port, which will be used to export our goods internationally. As you know, we hope to pave the road between the coast and the border with Brazil, so that those goods that come out of the Amazon and northern Brazil can actually get to the port in 18 hours as opposed to waiting 5 days to go up the Amazon, which will make it more attractive. So we've put down that international port at Clonbrook. The reason why Clonbrook is chosen is because the shortest distance between the end of the continental shelf and the coastline of Guyana is at Clonbrook. So that would be the logical location for that. In Region 5, the Phase 2 and Phase 3 of the MMA project, which was designed since back in the 60s, we will make sure that that is implemented so that we increase our rice production, of course, with the improvement in soil nutrient content. And that's what's going to happen in Region 5. In Region 6, those lands in the Upper Kanji, again for rice production. Plans have been there for the long as well. We will make sure that's there. And as you know, there's significant development for oil and gas. Eventually, we will have to build a high-span bridge over the Berbice River so that we increase the number of facilities that are available for the establishment of ports in Region 6. Region 7, which is an area that is ripe for hydropower generation. We will consult with the indigenous peoples in that region, the Yakawai and Arakuna, and develop plans in which they're centered of it for the generation of power, as well as agricultural produce. The road to Lethem, of course, which is already in the plans we'll complete. Region 8, tourism. You got from Paramakatoy, K2, Kurukubaru, and of course, paved roads all the way to Orindu. Region 9, Lethem will become an economic hub. We will have a duty-free zone so that goods that come from northern Brazil can be there on their way to being transported to Clonbrook. We'll also put down rail industrial parks or continue the enhancement of the industrial park there in Lethem. And Region 10, which is perhaps the best located region for servicing the interior region, 7, 8, and 9, that will become a commercial center. So, for example, in the mining industry, you don't have to come to Georgetown to get your spares, to get your replacements. You will actually go to Region 10, and that will become a commercial hub and center for dealing with those interior locations. I think I've spoken long enough. That's just the infrastructure and educational bit. But those are some of the core parts of what will form and make up part of our manifesto.
Well thought out plan. Will that be in your manifesto, though?
What's that?
Will that be in your manifesto?
Yes, yes. That and everything else. We got health, economic development.
Let me go to commercial break, folks. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Globespan has been in business for over 31 years.
Can
And they
I
have
take
offices.
2 minutes?
Pardon me?
Take the commercial break. Can I take 2 minutes, please?
Yes, yes.
Sure.
And we have been in office with offices in the US, Trinidad, Curriverton, Rosal, Tongue, and Georgetown. Globespan offers all airlines, such as Caribbean Airlines, JetBlue, British Airways, Copa, American Airlines, and more, plus an all-inclusive vacation and group tours to India, South Africa, Dubai, Europe, among many more destinations. Globespan has the Caribbean throwback. And to tell you, it's an airline with experience. So you can leave all your troubles with Globespan, and they will solve all your problems. Now, don't forget the duck curry that should be the curry duck versus duck curry cooking competition in Cancun, Mexico from August 7th to 11th. The curry duck versus duck curry cooking competition in Mexico from August 7th to 11th. So make sure you get there. And to make it even better, you can book your tickets with Globespan. They have an all-inclusive vacation tour with your culture, your cuisine, your music, and among your own people. Prices start at $14.95 per person. That's $1,495 per person, everything included. In New York, you can call 718-845-0437. 718-845-0437. Corriverton 335-3099. Rosalton 337-4287. Georgetown 227-1701. And don't forget our All for One. We can get your fresh Guyanese and Trinidadian food with deliveries in Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx, Long Island, and Manhattan. Guyanese style and Trini style, plus all catering. Boyfrom1.com. Freshly cooked meals, West Indian grocery shipping to all US states. So if you live outside New York, go to buyfrom1.com. And please, I'm asking all of you to support Globespan. You can hear your ads on Globespan calling 631-782-8694. 631-782-8394. Or email us at support@globespan24x7.com. Support@globespan24x7.com. So give us a call and place commercials with us, because without you, this program will not be able to continue. So we depend on you for the continuation of this program. Thanks to all of you for staying tuned and stay listening. Now, Mr. Najee Hughes is on a 2-minute break. I hope he gets back here in time. Mr. Hughes, are you back? Should be back in less than a minute. So stay tuned, folks. And I hope you've been enjoying the program. We will be broadcasting almost 6 or 7 days a week as we get closer to elections. A date will be announced and a time will be, but I think it might be the same time. But a date will be announced where we get all your political information on Guyana's upcoming elections on August, sometime in August, early August, I think. So stay tuned for the date, and we'll keep you updated on all the happenings across the 10 regions and among the 22 political parties that are vying for the presidency of the Guyana. And so we will provide all the update to you and give you all the information in detail. So stay tuned to Globespan Television for those dates, and I hope you will enjoy them as we enjoy this program. Now, Mr. Hughes, thanks for coming back. I want you to know that, I don't know if you look at the program last night, Mr. Norton, and the APNU kicked off. By the way, are there any chances for you going back in a coalition with the APNU before the elections?
I think the possibility for that is significantly reduced. Symbols are already in. Parties are selecting and submitting their candidates, so I don't think that's likely to take place. But
you have a number of persons, young people and others who have left the AFC and joined with APNU.
Uh-huh.
How do you address that issue?
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
I said there are a number of persons who have left the AFC and went over to join with APNU.
Mm-hmm.
How do we address those issues? Why they left?
They left because they were part of that. I attempted to explain that to you. When Mr. Norton and Mr. Ramjatan had their arrangements back in 2022-23, Miss Finance had been promised prime ministerial positions, and they had been promised various positions. And so that plan and program got interrupted when I got elected. So what happened after I got elected was that their attempts were to make sure that plan continued, because whatever arrangements that were made then continued. And so by various acts of subterfuge and undermining, they wanted to make sure that the plan that had been arranged between them and the PNC back then continued to be the dominant plan. And so when it became evident that the way in which they thought it should take place was not going to happen, they departed.
You expect more to be drifting off?
I think the persons who were hoping to benefit from that arrangement that existed then, most of them have gone. You can never say that all of them have left, but the good thing is that we have had new blood, and those that have been there for a while are committed to the ideals of the AFC, and that's what I am charged with maintaining.
Okay, good. I have some questions to ask you, and there should be one-liners. You know, Mr. Norton kicked off the APNU campaign last at the Coffee Square,
Mhm.
and these are some of the things that he proposed. Pensions will increase from 41,000 to 100,000. What you have to say about that? Would you do the same, match that, or go
Okay.
higher?
I can't give you one liner because I want people to understand the context. It's not the number that you're going to offer the pension. Let me say to start with, we believe in increasing the real value of what the pension is.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Right.
100,000 is it, we will match it to go above that. But this is this is the real test in real terms. You have to make sure that the pension can allow the pensioner to be able to not only afford the basics, but live a comfortable life. And that is not tied to a number. Because all what may happen is that once you push the number up, the inflation goes up, the cost of living goes up, and that 100,000 becomes the same value as it has today. So for us, it is not so much a number, but it's what they are the economic policies that are in place to make sure that you reduce the cost of living in real terms so that when you increase the pension, it's a real increase and it's not seen as, oh, you're getting $100,000. No, because if $100,000, if they can only buy, let's say, with $1,000, uh, a loaf of bread, rice, sugar for a week, then if you give them 100,000 and that 100,000 is only going to allow them to buy the same amount of commodities, then you're really not doing much. What you have to make sure is that your policies are such that you begin to bring down the cost of living so that they get a real increase whenever that pension goes up. So yes, of course, we would say $100,000. That's not the issue. The issue is what are the economic policies that you have in place to make sure that $100,000 is actually a real increase in terms of the goods that a pensioner, goods and services a pensioner can acquire.
APNU also proposed in the Because We Care program for students in school, paid given the parents, instead of $55,000, which is $50,000 for the child and $5,000 for uniform. The PNC or APNU proposed $125,000. Would you match that?
Yes, but again, I say it with the same caveat.
Right.
If $125,000 is going to buy exactly what it is, whatever they're getting now at $50,000, you're not really doing anything there. What you really need is the economic policies that you reduce the cost of living, you reduce the cost of the other
Mhm.
basket of goods and services in the country so that the increase is a real increase and not just seen as a numerical increase. But certainly we would match that. But I want to
Okay.
say what we keep forgetting, or perhaps what we keep forgetting, is that we have to be fiscally responsible.
Right.
We
Right.
have to make sure that whatever we're giving away, we are earning, and not earning from oil, earning from non-oil income. We
Got
have to
you.
be fiscally responsible, and we want to make sure that our budget, our non-oil budget, is balanced by 2030. Because all that happens now is you don't want to create a society in which people just expect the handouts without improving our production and making sure that we're in a stage where we can compete globally in whatever fields that we undertake.
Good. The 10-day workers, presently they earn $40,000 a month. He said he will add $50,000, make it $90,000 a month for 10-day workers. Would you match that?
Okay, we would restructure the whole 10-day worker thing. The idea that somebody only works for 10 days in a month and that is sufficient is I don't think is a productive approach. So in terms of employment, they have nothing to worry about. What we will do is make sure that their employment is regularized and that it's in aspects of the economy and in aspects of the production line in which it's sustainable, that they're actually doing productive work, they're undertaking productive enterprises. Right now, it's a political gimmick. You're giving people money, it's a handout. We want to make that part of the productive sector of our society.
Public servants will get an increase across the board of
Absolutely.
35%.
Yeah, absolutely. Public servants will get an increase. But again, I say that it is the context. I don't want to say, Euclid, let me give you $500,000 and it can buy you exactly what you could buy today with $5,000. It's what the real value is. What we have said for public servants, what we've said particularly is that we will increase the minimum wage to 200,000 or 220,000, and that would be tax-free. If you're earning 220,000, 250,000, sorry. If you're earning $250,000 and less, completely tax-free. You don't have to pay income tax on that. And that's where we're going. But again, you have to have, that's why you need the state planning and you need a well-resourced Ministry of Finance, because you have to look at the impact, the economic impact of that, and to make sure that there are measures in place where that money is not just, the increase is not just flowing right back into consumable items. So
you're
yes,
saying the AFC will increase public servants pay to $250,000 as a starting salary.
and also it would be tax-free. If you're earning up to
And
250,
tax-free.
tax-free.
Okay.
But
Apple will
again,
increase.
I do want to make this caveat. Guyana has to be competitive globally. It's
Right.
not we are not a government who is in the business of competing to distribute the resources of the country. This is not a government entering into a competition to see who could give out more. We strongly believe in fiscal responsibility. That's why we want to have our budget, our non-oil budget, balanced by 2030. So every increase that we give, we have to make sure of the impact of it. But the point I really want to make about that is you want to make sure that whatever we are paying as minimum allows us to produce high quality, world-class goods at world-class competitive pricing. So whatever industry we go into, whether it's IT, whatever we go into, that has to, because at the end of the day, the country has to be productive. We don't want to create sugar all over again, where it's you're subsidizing and subsidizing, because all you're doing there is just wasting resources. We have to make sure that we are training a population that is going to become world-class, highly educated, and delivering at the most competitive prices. So that is pretty fundamental.
It says all athletes will be paid a full salary, so they don't have to work. They just do their athletic work, practices, and so forth. Would you support something like that?
We have a different approach to athletics. We believe that athletics and the opportunities that athletics offer has to come in a structured program. So from the time you enter, sorry, the schooling system, there is a robust athletic program that has coaches at every level, so that by the time they get up to the stage where they're going to compete in the region and internationally, that program produces the best athletes and they get the best support. Coaches obviously are going to be employed and paid in that process. But ours is not a question of we're going to pay the coaches. We're saying the system itself that will make athletics and sports a key part of the developmental trajectory of any child from primary all the way through to university and the university is such that coaches, of course, will get jobs. And in the communities where they may not have the academic institutions, particularly in the hinterland, where there are excellent footballers and other athletes, we will make sure that there are coaches in those communities in a structured program. So I can't say to you, oh, we're going to pay the coaches. Of course, the coaches are going to get employment, but it has to be within a program. It's not just a standalone. It has to be within a very structured program. And if you look at Jamaica, Jamaica just produces world-class athlete over world-class athlete. And that just didn't come about overnight. That came about because they have a program in which a lot of children from the rest of the Caribbean try to get into schools in Jamaica just so that they can benefit from it. So it's the quality of the program, not so much the fact that you're going to create jobs for coaches. It has to come within some sort of structured program.
That's true. And last but not least, he says all students going to UG will be paid $50,000 a month as a stipend.
Well, we believe that people who are studying should get uh, some form of financial support. In the program I told you about, the 10-month or 12-month program, where the sort of voluntary national service, they're going to get a stipend. So students going to university, they ought to be given some sort of financial support assistance. I can't say to you a stipend per se at 50,000 because I haven't run that past our economic advisors. So I don't want to be out there and then they say, Mr. Hughes, oh, you can tell the students get 50,000. We don't know what the cost is, the impact on it. What I certainly would say, we are absolutely committed to making sure that every student that enters into the university is not placed in a position of economic hardship.
We're coming on to the end of the program. Do you support the One Guyana initiative?
And I'm not being facetious. You have to tell me what the One Guyana initiative is. I mean, if it's a slogan, or whether you're
It's
saying
to
the One
bring
Guyana,
unity to all Guyanese and prosperity to all Guyanese.
everybody, I can't think of any politician who does not support the idea of unity and prosperity to every Guyanese. I'm not sure you would call it One Guyana, but I think every politician in Guyana, worth his salt, would say they're in support of unity and they are in support of economic prosperity. That's why I asked you what you mean. I'm sure if you give me a few more details, I'd be in a better position to say whether I support it. But as an overall concept, absolutely, absolutely. The one thing that has eluded us for must be 50, 60 years, longer than that, 70 years, has been unity. So I'm not so concerned about the slogan for it. Is how do we, in practical terms, get to a place of unity?
Do you think President Ali has done a good job in the last 5 years?
Has President Ali been making the decisions for the last 5 years? That's the first question one would have to ask. I am not sure that President Ali has been afforded the opportunity to make all the decisions or the decisions that are important. So what if you're asking me whether in carrying out his functions as president he has performed, I would have to say there are reservations. Of course, there has been improvement. Absolutely no two ways about that, but it was the quality of the improvement. We have a Heroes Highway, which is built to last us 15 years. We got to redo it after two. So this is the first 5 years of commercial production, so we don't have anything to compare it against to say, well, this is how it adds up or it doesn't add up. But I certainly think he has tried, and you have seen you have seen improvement. The question is, what are the indicators and what are you measuring it against?
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this government?
Um, how would I rate this government? All right, I prefer to do that individually. The management of a country of Guyana with many ethnicities and obviously fragile racial architecture requires the participation of everybody in the decision making and requires the participation, the beneficiaries, everyone being a beneficiary of the benefit, the patrimony of the country. What this government has not done is consult with anybody other than itself over the last 5 years. So to start off at the decision-making stage, half the population, because they only got 50 point something percent of the vote, half the population has not ever been consulted on the development plans they have. Having not consulted them, to come back to say to them after 5 years, look, you see you got a new road, and look, you got a new school, and look, this has changed, I think is really an insult, because you cannot say to me in an enterprise in which we jointly are participating that you're making all the decisions without consulting me, and then come back and saying, oh, I should endorse this because you made it and we've seen some changes. So the first fundamental flaw in I think President Ali's approach to government is there has been absolutely no consultation other than the border issue with the with the opposition or other people other than themselves. So on that scale, I don't think he gets more than a 3. In terms of economic growth, I think we have to understand that what we're seeing as fantastic numbers is not as a result of any policy of President Ali or his predecessor, is a result of the fact that we found a lot of oil and the oil prices are good. So none of that is a response is a result of any politician, whether Granger or Ali or anybody before that. That's just good fortune that we have found this resource. The real test about that is how we managed it. And if we look at projects like the gas to shore project, which started at somewhere around 800 million US dollars, that now and which was supposed to deliver cheap electricity at half the price or less by a particular date that has passed, we have a project that is mired in legal problems. It has skyrocketed, sorry, to over $2 billion. The date for the delivery of electricity is no longer going to be, you're no longer hearing that it's going to be cheaper. It's pushed back to 2027. And the project, by all intents and purposes, seems to be a failure. So again, on that basis, I'm afraid Mr. Ali doesn't score a lot of points there. So the gas to energy, which is a key part of his portfolio, of his program, is not there. In terms of cheap electricity, we had one power ship that came that was supposed to end all blackouts. Didn't happen. We were told this would be the end of blackouts. It hasn't happened. A second power ship has come. Again, no blackouts. We keep getting blackouts. So something is fundamentally flawed with the management of our energy sector, particularly the power generating sector, because we're not getting the cheap electricity from the gas to energy by the date, and we're not even sure anymore what's going to be the cost to deliver the electricity, because there's been no feasibility done, nothing provided to the public. And again, that's why the Freedom of Information Act is where it is. So again, I'm afraid I can't give him good points in that for those reasons. If you talk about social relations, I'm sorry. A young lady dies in a pool or dies at a location on the on the east
Institution.
In Tushin, yeah. I was just trying to put it in terms of County East Essequibo. And within 48 hours, there are fires throughout the country. Forget where you stand politically on that. The country erupts in under 48 hours, not as a result of some planned political protest, but just that people were so outraged that that happened. That means that the relations in this country are exceedingly fragile and can be triggered by the slightest of incidents. Not that the death of Miss Young is slight, but it means that on the surface, we don't even have to go below the surface. Our relations are in a bad place that can happen so easily. So again, on the social relations, we're in a bad place. If you ask people that come from a certain sector of this community, they will say to you that they have been excluded from the economic prosperity of the country. The contractor class does not have representatives, and let me pick the easiest one. I can't think of a big indigenous contractor in the country, period. None. And similarly, if you expand that grouping, the contractor class, which is the one that's making the most money and celebrating, is limited to a very, very small part of the country. So even in terms of our social relations, the tensions are there, we are fragile. And again, I'm afraid I can't give him a high mark there. He doesn't go past 4 there for me. I think he's likable, but I don't think the fundamental issues of where the rubber hits the road, anything has changed. As a matter of fact, I think they've got worse. When you come to police conduct, I mean, you just have to pick the list of incidents where people up to now are dissatisfied with the conduct of the police. They don't solve crimes. Henry Brothers, or in Boston, he gets shot. I think the guy got convicted the other day. Paper shorts. This happens less than 100 yards from the president's residence. You can list Quindon Bacchus. You can just list the amount of incidents. And one would have thought that given that level of impunity in the actions of the police, by now you would have had an independent body established on the law with the power to investigate and prosecute policemen. Doesn't exist. The whistleblowing legislation, in which people who are inside and can come forward with evidence of corruption, never implemented. Human Rights Commission, recommended by the Constitutional Reform Commission since 2001. We are in 2025, never established. Or several of the recommendations for constitutional change, never established. So again, I'm afraid with the best will in the world, I can't give him a good pass mark.
Mr. Hughes, I'll tell you, I'll have to bring you back before the elections, if you'll have the time. Now, the last question to you is this. Do you think we'll have a majority government?
No.
Given the fact that 22 parties are vying for the presidency, is the highest in the country. It's the highest in the, Jamaica had at least 17 in this last election, Trinidad 13, but this is the highest in all of the Caribbean islands I can think of. 22 parties. Do you think we'll have a majority government?
No, I just answered that. I said, no, you won't get a majority government. But I think what the number of parties indicates is that the number of people who are dissatisfied with the political process. And I think it's a good thing that more people participate, because you can't have a winner-take-all system. We just had yesterday in Suriname a president elected, and under their constitution, she had to have gotten 60% of the votes of the parliamentarians. And that's what you need in a multi-ethnic society. You need a president who must make it his duty, and for whom there's a constitutional requirement for him to get 60% of the vote. Because when you get 60% of the vote of the MPs, it means you've got a cross-racial support.
You're speaking about Ms. Jennifer Simmons. She's the new president of Suriname, the first female president of, I think Suriname is a republic.
Yeah, Suriname is a republic.
The Republic of Suriname. And that's good for the Caribbean. So we had a number of female presidents now, our prime ministers: Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, Suriname, Guyana, of course, Janet Jagan, and Eugene Charles from the Dominican Republic, and a couple of other small islands. So women are doing very, very well in the political field. So, Mr. Hughes, we have come to the end of the program, as I said. Go ahead.
Can I just
Yeah, go ahead.
I think we're long past the stage of being fascinated by the fact that a woman has become a prime minister. I don't subscribe to that. I think women are probably better qualified, but I think the people who have been elected, who happen to be female, have been elected because of their abilities and not necessarily because of their sex. And I think we need to reach a stage where we pass this thing, oh, we got the first female. No, she's got there in her policies, and clearly her policies
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. So we just have to wait and see what she will be doing in the next 5 years. The elections are like 5 years from now, 2030 as well. So we must congratulate Ms. Jennifer Simmons, President Jennifer Simmons, and hoping that Suriname maintain good relationship with Guyana. Mr. Hughes, we have come to the end of the program, so I'm asking you for your closing remarks.
I just want to express my gratitude to you for having afforded me an opportunity to share just a few of the Alliance for Change policies in the event that we're fortunate enough to be elected to office. I want to say to your viewers, thank you very much for, if you stayed for the length of the program or even part of the program, for having joined us. And I believe that fundamentally what is needed in this country is a change. And I think we provide a better option than any of our competitors for that change.
Thank you very much. And folks, thank you for listening. We must thank all our listeners, our sponsors. Thank Mr. Noir Singh for making this program available, Mr. Devin Bissoon, and Mr. Ryan Gobin as well, our two technical directors. And to all our listeners far and wide, we special thanks to you. And if it's Monday, it's me, 7:30 to 9, Globespan Television. Tune in every Monday. It's on Facebook, it's on YouTube, and all the other social networks. So thank you all again, once again, for listening, and hope you have a very pleasant rest of the evening. Thank you very much. And Mr. Hughes, thanks to you too for coming in. As I said, we'll have to bring, as a matter of fact, sometime in August, we'll start running the program for a full week. So we'll have you and maybe a number of other guests coming into the program so as to fill the void or fill those days. So thanks again to you for well-explained, thoughtful, comprehensive vision of the AFC party. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night.